Reamer. I'm so stupid. I never should have asked you to fight in the dark. It was completely my fault. Her hand had started to hurt beyond the tender wound, and she avoided thinking about its implications. Your fault. I'm the one who sunk my blade into you. I swear that thing's cursed. First Therilyn and now you. It hurts everything that's precious to me. I'm precious to you? For how much danger she was in, she shouldn't have focused on the sentiment, but it pleased her beyond words. Her smile met her eyes, and for a moment, her heart filled with hope rather than dread. Of course. I mean, you know. He swiveled his eyes away from her. I know, Harrow. I know. She treasured his innocent reaction and reflected on how precious he was to her, too. What do you want to do about your injury? Ask Tuner to write me a remembrance requiem? She wasn't sure how to take the topic seriously. She felt too far removed from it. I don't have a plan yet. I just wanted to tell you as soon as I saw it. Reamer, Harrow pleaded. That's not funny. His concern settled her humor. She considered. I want to fight it off without getting help. It might kill you. If I traveled to Hisafe for medical attention now, assuming D12 would even allow me to go, I might die on the way. At least here, I can enjoy the time I'd have left. What if D12 sends you out again? I'd mention it then. Being overtaken by an infection in the desert alone is the least desirable option. Reamer hadn't wanted to raise Harrow's hopes, so she didn't mention the one other option she had in mind. Prior to leaving King Tanzanite's training academy, a seasoned scout had provided the new surveillance and reconnaissance rates with a brief set of instructions on how to perform their duties. Because the instructor had been so strict during the lecture, Reamer did not disrupt at any point throughout the lesson. However, she had wanted to prod the others in her rate to get a sense of who they were and if she could rely on them. Most of the other scouts seemed aloof or unwilling to speak with her. She didn't know if that was because they were introverted, unfriendly, generally uninterested, terrified of the instructor's scrutiny, or biased against female associates amongst a male-dominated rate. However, she managed to prompt one of her other rates without receiving an instant dismissal. T-43, a lean, long-faced man, seemed willing to hear her out. She broached various ideas in anticipation for the trip north. She posed the topics as hypotheticals, but acting on them wouldn't exactly fall within the guidelines that their instructor had just laid out. They were practical suggestions for discovering additional information regarding Rhysogli movements and patterns, even if a bit imprudent in terms of logistics. At the time, T-43 hadn't outright agreed with her musings, but as far as Reamer could tell, he hadn't tattled on her since, either. T-43 had kept his distance by spending the majority of his time with his own unit. He didn't bother to acknowledge her on the occasions their paths crossed in the small camp. She hoped his prior indifference was a calculated strategy rather than intentional snubbing. For the sake of her life, she gambled on it. Casually, she approached T-43 as he spoke with his first sergeant. She waited until he concluded his conversation with his superior. T-43, I needed to ask you about one of the last reports you returned with, she said vaguely. His first sergeant nodded over to her in unspoken approval. T-43 walked away from the camp and the other listening ears. Reamer kept in close step. What do you want? Do you remember what I spoke to you about back at the Sandstone Castle? T-43 shook his head and her heart fell, worried that he had forgotten. I'm not straying outside of D12's rules. I'm just doing the job the way we were taught. I won't be poking my nose where it shouldn't be. I prefer my back unmarred. His eyes widened on the last word. Reluctantly, she unwrapped her hand and showed him the yellow, crusted wound. Please. Shit. T-43 glanced back towards his first sergeant before positioning himself between his superior and Reamer's injury. I have almost no coins to my name, but you can have all I have left, she pleaded, reaching into her coin pouch to pull out the Sovani-led coins with her uninjured hand. I'm supposed to head to scout Yukala. If my first sergeant hadn't given me permission to speak with you first, I would be on my way there now. I don't have time to help you. Do you think any of the others would be willing? I wouldn't trust them. I could die. What other choice do I have? T-43 shook his head again and let out a long breath. If you tell them, they'll immediately go to D12 to rat you out. Better to wrap that back up and take your chances praying to Asiel. It'll be better to succumb to the infection before D12 finds out what you were doing to receive an injury like that. Reamer wanted to cry at the rejection. She had figured it would have been a long shot, but she still held hope. For her remaining prospect to be trampled, she wanted to crumple. She knew T-43 was probably right about alerting the others in their rate. If she was going to perish, she didn't need a lashing before she died. She would save herself that pain at the very least. She wrapped up her hand, and T-43 jogged toward the camp's provision stores. He did not look back. Reamer's condition worsened. She had gone from upright to bedbound in a turn of the sun's. She simmered in her armor, but she boiled without its protection. She kept it donned, knowing it was the better option. Her biggest fear was losing her hand, which ached from the slightest pressure. "Basil, please help me." She vaguely remembered gentle touches and familiar voices discussing whether to amputate it, but she was too groggy to contribute her opinion. After the conversation, she lost consciousness. Reamer woke to Harrow, holding her uninjured hand. His tough skin rubbed the inside of her palm pleasantly, and she kept thinking about how she didn't want him to let go. She squeezed her fingers closed to keep him close. "Morning," she said sleepily. He laughed. "It's afternoon, but I'm glad you're doing well enough to recall your pleasantries." As soon as she remembered herself, the urge to check if she still had her other hand captivated her. A mound of bandages consumed her left hand, but whether her hand was inside it or not, she couldn't tell. She tried squeezing a fist, but she still couldn't tell. There was pain, and she tried wading through to decide whether it came from her palm or the end of her arm. "Harrow, do I still have my hand?" "Do I want to know the answer? Right now it could be yes. If I find out, it might never again be yes." "It's bundled tight, so it might feel numb, but yes, you do. It was a miracle, especially since we don't have any medics. N-15 cared for you as best she could." Reamer exhaled a breath she hadn't meant to hold. "Basil, thank you. I will never ask for another blessing in my entire life." "N-15 did? I thought she was a tailor before she enlisted." "She was." "I'm exalted. I don't have the memory of the treatment then. I'll have to thank her later." Harrow's brows came together. "One of the other scouts also helped. He dropped off a golden root and a dark berry before running off." Reamer was touched that T-43 helped her after all. Harrow continued, "He told me not to tell anyone that I saw him, but he gave me instructions on how to make a salve for you. I was pretty lucky. I finished applying it just before N-15 came to cut out the infected skin and stitch you up." Reamer tried to focus on keeping gratitude at the front of her mind rather than let the mental images of her surgery and accompanying nausea overtake her. To switch topics, she said, "Harrow, I want to ask you something." "Is it about what I said to you while you were sick?" Reamer sat up. "What did you say?" A different curiosity aided her. Never mind. What did you want to ask me?" No. You have to tell me what you said." "It was just about wanting you to recover." "Mm-hmm." She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "And your question?" "I was going to ask that we never duel again in the dark, but now I'm wondering if I should keep asking what else you said." "That was what I said. I also promised never to duel in the dark. If we ever duel again, it will be because we've snuck away during daylight." "Deal." After a lecture from N-15 and another night of rest, Reamer improved. As fast as the infection had come, it left, and once she was well enough to travel, the Major General sent her to inspect Shasti. She didn't mind searching the area surrounding the large town, but she resented D12 for sending her there presumably out of nepotism to protect his relation, Lord Danburite. But Harrow's wholesomeness drove her on. He would do it for the sake of the innocents in the town. That could be reason enough for me, too. Upon arriving in Shasti, a series of wheat crawlers busied themselves working on elaborate geometric designs in the sand to attract a mate. Mesmerized, she watched the overgrown insects toil away at their perfect circles, straight lines, and exact corners. I don't want to be anywhere close to here when the females fly in, but it's interesting to watch for now. After the tedious trek through the desert, she would find enjoyment in whatever form it came in, and thinking about Harrow calling her precious only occupied part of her time. The wheat crawlers dragged their pointed armored butts in the ground to create both the sharp and rounded edges of their meticulous patterns. Like the gentleman bugs they were, they did not interfere with the designs of their neighbors. When they met the edge of another wheat crawler's pattern, they politely turned back and continued their own until they ran out of space. Reamer took a wide circle around the area. She hadn't wanted to scare the creatures away, but she wanted to look at the various creations of each of the animals. She should be moving on to search for signs of Rhysogli. Considering my recent recovery, I can be a little easier on myself today and spare a few moments admiring their work. The designs remind me of the stained glass patterns in the old cathedrals. If I ever return home, I'll make a few. Once Reamer had her fill, she started on her circuit. It was good timing, for the females arrived to join their counterparts shortly after, and the chirping noises could be heard across town, though muted. She checked the high points and the low points around the town. She searched through the tall grasses for claw marks in the soil. She scanned the roof lines made of overlapping wheat crawler shells and sought broken windows. Anything unusual or out of place she would report. Even if she hadn't understood what a sign might mean, she had plenty of time on the road back to ponder a plethora of potential ideas. As far as she could tell, everything had seemed normal. I have never actually seen what a town looks like before a Rhysogli, though, so I have no idea if I'm even looking for the right indicators, but I'll try my best. Once night had taken hold, she hunkered down on the second highest spot overlooking the town. If a Rhysog scout did come, she assumed they'd climbed the highest point, and she didn't feel comfortable fighting one alone if she could help it. Stupid D12. His lack of preparation is going to get us all killed. Maybe once Scabbard gets deployed up here, D12 will be amenable to having a master teach the whole company safely. Well, we'll see. While internally griping, she kept her lookout. Her eyes couldn't see much beyond the light of the town, but she sat downwind from it. Even if a Rhysogli scouted the other side, leveraging the high ground or not, it shouldn't be able to smell her. In the eerie quiet, she realized the wheat crawlers had piped down their activities. Without finding any indicators that Shasti was in danger, she backtracked to the other side of town to embark on her return trip to Rakasif. When she passed the wheat crawlers' patterns again, she could barely make them out. One poor wheat crawler remained in the center of his pattern, but all the other pairs had taken off together. He swiveled his neck back and forth, searching the empty black sky. Reamer's heart went out to the animal. There's still a mate for you yet out there. Hold on a little longer. She'll find you tomorrow when the suns rise again. To avoid disturbing the beautiful patterns, Reamer began walking around them again, but her efforts were in vain, for tracks of another creature had already disturbed the sands, ruining the lines. When she examined them closer, the prints had 3 lines leading to an elongated footprint. It looked like the creature started running on 2 legs and then switched to 4. Although uncertain, Reamer had a foreboding feeling the tracks belonged to a Rhysogli, and if they had disturbed the wheat crawler's circles, they had left since she had first passed by the patterns. T23, unless you have solid evidence that you've seen a Rhysogli with your own eyes, don't waste my time with your speculation. D12 dismissed Reamer from his massive tent. She was still panting from her run across the desert. She had wanted to relay the news as soon as possible for the army to arrive in time to stop the Rhysog attack. Yes, sir. Rather than argue with him, she left to complain to N15. Reamer found her first sergeant sitting alone atop a hill near the camp. He's still insisting that we're pulling back to Fagori today. Can't you do anything? If it were up to me, we'd be marching there now. However, I don't have the testimonies from all the other surveillance and reconnaissance rates. D12 could be basing his decision to go back to Fagori on multiple factors we're unaware of. We know the next platoon will be arriving there shortly. Perhaps he wants to meet up with them before reevaluating. The town will disappear by the time they get here, and he assigned someone to go check on Shasti again. We don't know that. Even if there was a Rhysogli in Shasti yesterday, they might be sending multiple scouts of their own out to different villages. They might be checking to see where we aren't, and then attacking accordingly. Given their superior speed, it's not a bad tactic. Say that's true. If a Rhysogli came to Rakasif and saw us stationed here, they would go somewhere else. And since we can't catch them on foot, we must surprise them in an ambush if we want to deal any damage before they flee. So what are we doing, setting up a massive campsite and strutting around in our armor all day? We're broadcasting our position and effectively telling them where to raid next, or at least where not to raid if they want to escape unscathed. N15 pinched the bridge of her nose at the corners of her eyes. Reamer, I hear you. I agree with you. You're a smart girl. I know you can see what's going on here. I know you can see Rakasa flourishing from our protection. I know you can see D12's family business growing because of it. I know you know why we're stationed here, wearing our full armor. I know why you're frustrated about it. But the decision is still not ours to make. I do not mind having these discussions with you in private, but please do not speak of such frustrations to Harrow in the open where the Major General can hear you. I don't want any more of my platoon members risking whippings or infections again. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am. Guilt nodded Reamer for Harrow's lashes. She turned to leave. One more thing. Reamer faced N15. Bearing everything I mentioned in mind, there are citizens in Rakasa who feel safer because we're here. And there is a chance they are. Reamer wished her first sergeant's notion inspired confidence, but she could only lament how their company was failing the northern region, the crusade efforts, the realm, and the faith. But we're leaving now. The Rhysoglyph could come once we go. If there are attacks on Rakasa or Shasti, the blood will be on D12's hands. But yours will be clean because you did everything you could to help. If we had control of the situation, our position would be different. For now, we focus on the good we have done.